Lusk was a special place for myself and for everybody else who grew up from the 50s onwards. But I suppose you could say the same about every other little village in Ireland. Elphin was a great place for those who lived in Elphin. Ballydehob was a great place for the people of Ballydehob. But looking back and listening to the reminiscences of those times, one thing struck me, and that was that everybody talks about the wonderful old times and nobody mentions the people who went away to England, to America, all over the world looking for a better life. And personally, I remember those times as good but bad as well. I'm not the only one. John Kelly said of those times, he said, to the average Irish youth, the 1950s did not hold much hope for the future. There were no jobs, there was little explanation for the situation. After all, ours was a glorious history. Ours was the only true religion, ours was a distinct culture, and we had our own new national independence. That was enough for most people, but not for the jobless youth. And personally, that's the way I remember it too. I have to admit, I'm not a great believer in this old nonsense of, wasn't it great when we hadn't an arse in our trousers, but we shared what little we had, little as it was. As far as I'm concerned, that type of reminiscence gets sanitised and romanticised over the years. And people tend to want to remember the good times and maybe not even mention the bad times. But there were good and there were bad as well. Ireland in the 20th century was a much slower and more resistant place to change than most of Europe. There were reasons for that. First of all, I suppose we were an island nation and we were restricted from the travel and the influence that people and change had. We also missed in many ways the Second World War and the momentous things that happened, because for most of Europe it was torn apart from 1939 to 1945, and it had to rethink and rebuild itself in the late 40s and the 50s. That didn't happen in Lusk and didn't happen anywhere else in Ireland either. We were still an agriculturally based community.